Push beta number 2 is nearing its end, and it's probably going to end for good before this video is out. I put my feedback into the form of video because I think this way it can be more thorough and easier to understand than plain text, and I can provide footage of what I'm talking about for even better clarity. Plus, I just like making videos. Not wasting any more time, question 1. What do you think about structure of the map? We'll go at it first in regards to map-wide features and then area by area. Lighting. The two immediate things that stand out when we're talking about lighting on the map is that the map is very dark and very monochromatic. Why being dark is a problem is that you have props on the map that are also dark, and in dimly lit environment, dark props on the dark surface will meld into the environment, essentially camouflage themselves away from your view. The problem with it is that if your attention is somewhere else, because you're fighting the enemy for God's sake, you're not going to be paying attention to camouflaged into the environment props. So you're likely to just bump into the props without noticing them when your attention is being held by something somewhere else. Therefore, environment should be better lit, so you don't have to pay attention to the environment when you're fighting the enemy to navigate it properly. Additionally, the monochromatic nature of lighting on this map is also not helping. Because everything is illuminated with the same color of light, the problem with props melding into the environment is exacerbated even more, because everything is roughly the same color, roughly the same darkness, and illuminated with roughly the same color of light, which also is dim on top of that. And we have, of course, sources of white light and sources of yellow light on this map, but majority of lighting on this map is just green. And that just green makes everything that is already melding into each other meld into each other even more, making entirety of the map essentially a visual equivalent of a blended soup. However, that can be quite easily fixed. After all, you have sources of yellow, pink and blue light already on the map. You just have them, got them in the upper sphere. You could fix this map quite easily by making it either an assembly, disassembly, or just a service area for neon signs. We already have neon signs as part of Canthan architecture and general vibe, so you could use it to put just a lot of neon signs, either as a junk, just junk that shines a light, being fixed, being tested, being disassembled or assembled somewhere both in these areas and just lying as props everywhere where you currently have a box or anything to provide additional sources of lighting. And because those are neon signs, and you can make those neon signs in pretty much any color you want, you can add multiple sources of light of whatever kind you want pretty much everywhere on the map if you want to be creative. You can have these signs attached to walls, laying on the floor, just hanging from whatever or from ceiling, and you can just copy and paste this lamp in more areas. In general, lighting is too monochromatic and the map is too dark. Those are two immediate problems that you can easily fix by just adding more sources of light. Central skirmish area. The central area of the map where initial skirmish happens has one major flaw. Basically, it's not symmetrical. One team gets just those two barrels and this lantern to hide behind, while the other team gets pretty much quite easily accessible high ground in top form of this tank, and much better cover also in form of this tank, which can be utilized by one team to hide behind it and assault the initial objective with ranged pressure, while the other team has to stand basically in open with maybe those two flimsy barrels to hide behind while they are fighting for the central objective. This of course can be remedied in only one way: make the goddamn central area bloody symmetrical. Upper geometry and high grounds. There is also one thing to be said about high grounds on this map. Specifically, there is no good and attainable high ground anywhere on the map except this bloody tank we were already talking about. First of all, there is no high ground coming from spawn overseeing the main area. The only high ground you potentially can have is this one with the buff, but it doesn't reach or extend towards the central area. There is a high ground over here on this little balcony, but, well, it oversees literally bloody nothing. What I would suggest is taking this piece of geometry, which as we can see is separate from the stairs over here, and make it extend instead of from behind towards the central objective. If it was extending towards the central objective instead of extending towards bloody nothing, there could be a high ground for both teams, because those are symmetrical, that could oversee the main objective. And because there's quite a lot of distance from here to where enemy team essentially spawns, if the balcony was ending somewhere over here or even over here, it would not be too big of an advantage for one team or the other to have this high ground. Because, well, repeating again, those are symmetrical on both sides of the map. This tank isn't. And so this tank is, as of current, a bigger advantage to one team that both of these high grounds would be if they were just extending towards the central objective. Other type of high ground that exists in this game, in this map, sorry, and is also symmetrical is this thing, except it's completely worthless. Why is it completely worthless? Because it is attainable, or it has to be accessed from over here. You have to walk this ramp and then walk this another ramp to get to this high ground. Once you are over here, it is much better to assail the enemy team coming like this, from here, and just use this as an escape route. Coming on top of this entire thing, just so you can do the same thing you could do from ground level, is waste of time for most classes. Especially considering that if you are respawning, you're doing so either from this or this pawn. Considering if you're respawning, you're doing it so either from this side or from this side. And if you're respawning from this side and coming to contest fight happening in that tunnel over here, you have to already come up to here from that side of the spawn to be able to access the high ground. Once you're already here, you're already fighting. When you start going up the high ground, enemies can just chase you. Because if you are trying to access this high ground, you would do so because enemies are entering this area. Meaning, essentially, entering this high ground is a waste of time. For anyone, essentially. If you either made it accessible by shorter ramp, or made this ramp in question, extend in towards that spawn, instead of extending towards the enemy team potentially, it would be much more likely that someone would probably like to access this high ground. North base. Spawn points are generally fine. I have one major issue in regarding to north spawn, which is mainly this thing. This part of geometry, this elevated piece of floor, makes it so if you are fighting an enemy team like that is assaulting your spawn and they are already on the ramp and you're trying to use this as a cover to fire at them and not take too much damage in return, you have to take this thing, you have to take account of this thing, essentially. If you try to dodge away from danger, you will be cock-blocked by this piece of geometry. So you essentially have to learn to jump your skills just to move normally in and out of cover. It is kind of stupid if you think about it. Additionally, there are more places on the floor when you are stuck against the floor, because the things are just a little too tall to be walked over. And speaking of places you're getting stuck, this ramp is a spawn of Satan. For some reason, Point behaves on this ramp very, well, in a bizarre manner. I don't even know how to explain this in proper words. It starts going back the ramp when it gets captured by the team who is trying to push up the ramp, or it sometimes goes up the ramp when it's captured by the team that wants it to go down the ramp. I have seen very bizarre behaviors, as if Point was trying to get over here when it's being captured on the ramp. I cannot explain this in proper words. I hope the footage provided will speak for itself. On the opposite side of the Point high ground, there is this kind of pile of junk, which is very handy because it provides an option to climb towards the high ground from the lower ground for the team who is pushing or is being pushed out from this area. If you want to flank, you have an option too. Essentially, this pile of junk makes this area pretty good to defend, but not too easy to defend. The only problem I see with this high ground is that it is completely open space, especially from this side. I think that putting something, like anything, any geometry over here in this corner would benefit the flow of this part of the map. South base. Southern side spawn is a little better and a little worse. First of all, there is no problem in getting blocked in this corner of the high ground. However, there is also no pile of junk over here, meaning this spawn can't be accessed as easily from here. What you have to do is you have to go up the stairs and access it from here, which isn't entirely the best thing you would want to do, as well, with the pile of junk it would just be faster. Additionally, still, no geometry over here, no geometry anywhere else. This is an empty plane of land. This is undefendable. This little corner again is one of the best pieces of cover that defenders have in this general area. However, what I think we should do is we took at least one pipe, like the green right thinner ones, and jab it directly over here, so that this space has a little cover on both sides. It won't be much cover for the attackers, and it will still suit defenders better than attackers, but it will be cover for both sides to some extent, which will make the area, I think, a little more dynamic and interesting to play from both perspectives. Choke and funnel points. Corners of the map are symmetrical, so we can tackle both of them at the same time. This area doesn't have a lot of problems. The only one I can point out with geometry is, well, access to the high ground, which we talked about already. The only other problem is, well, lighting. It's dim, the place is dark, and all the sources of light are overbearing green, which makes the entire area just meld into one dark green visual mess. Fortunately, in terms of geometry is fine. You have cover in terms of this pipe, in terms of these pipes. There's enough cover coming from this side, however, I don't necessarily see the reason to fortify this side more than that side, because, well, this side, much less fighting happens over here. Which might be the reason why they put entire jungle here, but hey. What I can say about this area that it is lacking is high ground, or verticality in general. The highest point over here that I can climb is either these boxes or these generators over there. There is just not enough ways to gain the upper hand on the opponent through climbing the environment. There is no shortcuts, there is no potential advantageous positions. There is just a plain space with pipes going upwards. Yay! Question 2. Does the new scoring UI communicate all of the information that you expect, or is something missing? UI I have no issues with. If the mode was shipped with UI in its current state, I'd be satisfied with UI's quality. Question 3. How does the new center objective feel? In general, it is certainly an improvement over the previous installment. There is more counterplay than just auto-losing that was in the case with previous central objective. However, it still doesn't fix the fact that players can just bunker up and almost ignore it through defensive boons, barrier, and simply out-healing its damage in critical cases. That's all I have to say about the map itself, but not all I have to say in general. There is the issue of defense bloat, with classes being able to upkeep protection permanently, layer defenses like auras with different buffs, and straight up tank the opponents while abusing the ease at which some specs do damage from safe position, to completely dismantle the mode and reduce it to another bunker measuring contest. Additionally, there are target cap abuse strategies already forming in the mode, and I can tell you right now, if you won't balance bunkers out of PvP or make this mode have completely separate balancing from Conquest, it is going to turn into hellscape. All people rallying off of one kill and completely swinging a fight shouldn't be allowed to happen. Permanent magnetic aura upkeep shouldn't be allowed to happen. Prot stacking and chill spamming shouldn't happen either, just like true one-shots shouldn't. But all except the last one happen in this mode, usually at the same time and at the expense of the most unexperienced players who just don't know how to deal with bunkers yet. This mode, from what I understand, is supposed to be slovenly fun for casuals, and that identity is being overtaken by grimy, slow, unwavering expanse of bunker comps. Because you can stand an inch off of the point and still contribute to the fight with your AoE damage and your shared utility, while ignoring the point contest debuff. You could try to combat that by making the point larger, you could try to fix that by making the point larger or by making the debuff apply AoE around the point. You could try to fix that by making the point itself larger, or by making the debuff apply in AoE around the point larger than the point itself. But that's a band-aid fix that won't help the fact that the balance of the game is just entirely reliant on players splitting up away from each other. If you want to make this You want to make this mode fun for casual play? You will have to kill the bunkers. One way or another. There is no way around it. Like there is no way for Overwatch. You want to make this mode fun for casual play? You will have to kill the bunkers. One way or another. There is just no way around it. Like there was no way for Overwatch around triple tank, triple support meta. That's all I have to say, and I hope my feedback could be considered at least worth the time. Thank you for your time, and Trapface out.